Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Michael Jaquith. He's a life coach for men, and he's also a great podcast host. He hosts the podcast called Catholic Life Coach for Men. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Ajay, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. And, I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from what we are going to discuss about how to live a life of purpose and abundance, not just in India, but also in many places across the world today on video, tomorrow on audio, as well as text. So my first question to you, Michael, is to understand, that especially men, we have to keep on doing so many things at the same time, family, work, and everything. And many a times, we want to have control over things. And sometimes, in trying to control over other things, we lose control over ourselves. Help us understand the different types of controls that we have to struggle with, and what we can do about such controls, so that we actually do the right sort of control and not the wrong sort of control.
Ajay, this is such a great and timely question. Right now, we are in a crisis of this idea of control. And I'd say it's one of the most common subjects that comes up with men I work with. And there's this tension. The tension is on the one side, I want to take extreme ownership. I want to make sure that I guarantee that I'm doing everything I can to show up to deliver the best results. But on the other side, I recognize I can't control other people. I can't control the outcomes. All I can ultimately control is myself. And so you see there's a tension here of how do I take responsibility for something that I can't really control? And the answer there comes actually in a funny way, in a form of submission. And now, there's a lot of different perspectives. I come from a Christian background, but whatever your background, most people understand the idea there has to be something bigger than yourself out there, right? And when we place ourselves in submission to there, it becomes all of a sudden the two become connected, the tension is resolved. And it becomes, yes, I am responsible. I need to show up in 100% the best way I can show up towards the end I want to accomplish. And if something goes wrong, I immediately take responsibility and say, where did I not show up well? But I don't ever try to control someone else. I don't ever try to control something. I could sit here as much as I want and try to make my car float off the ground. It's not going to work. And so I need to look at what can I do. Now, so far I've said things that sound very philosophically cool, but perhaps not very practical. So if I could just real quickly make this a little bit practical. And I think a lot of it comes from this point, again, this associated with this idea of submission is this idea of humility, this idea of what in me is not going well. Where could I have shown up better? What did I not do right? What did I not do as best as I could? And having that introspective and realizing that in any given situation, let's talk about marriage, right? Maybe you have a marriage and the situation of the marriage didn't go quite right. Maybe your spouse is 70 or 80 or heavens, even 90% to blame. I don't care. Look just at that 10%. What did I do? And in that level of introspection, we discover a freedom. The freedom to not be bound by the errors, mistakes, or inadequacies or shortcomings of others, and to live in the power that we ourselves have to bring. And the truth is, Ajay, we have way more power to bring to a situation than we regularly realize.
Wonderfully explained, Michael. Wonderfully explained. And so we'll come to the other aspect you talked about, marriage. You say that without a solid marriage, you cannot thrive. Now that's a great thing. A lot of people know about it, but when it comes to you, it is like underlining the thing that is very, people know about it. But then a lot of people, either men or women, keep on thinking, that I will be able to first achieve this, then I will achieve this, then I will achieve this, and then I have a full control over my life, and then I will think of marriage. That will be the time when I will be. So how do you calibrate both the thoughts, and in terms of thriving as well as waiting for that day when when you will actually get to this position of a good marriage?
I'm going to start by painting a picture. I want you to imagine, Ajay, this day this perfect day where you kick butt and you awesome at work, you accomplish amazing things, you come home and you serve your wife and you're lovingly present with her all on the same day. And if you have children, you engage with them in a deep, dynamically meaningful way. And here's why I'm painting this picture. What do you feel in your body as you visualize this day? The sense of meaning, satisfaction, and completion. And on the one hand, I think we limit ourselves with thoughts of saying, I have to do A and then B. And the reality is that we have so much potential and power that we can show up and we can do both. And as a human being, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to have setbacks. I'm going to have failures. I can love myself through those. But I reject this dichotomy of I have to first do A and then B and then I'll be ready for marriage. Because here's the reality. No matter what marriage prep courses you've gone through and what books you've read, nothing prepares you for the struggle that's marriage, because nothing like marriage casts a mirror into the corrupt, selfish nature of me. And that's painful. Your spouse, their primary job is to hold that mirror up to you and say, do you see where you're still being selfish? Do you see where you're still being egotistical and conceited? And when we look in that mirror, especially as men, but also for women, when we look in that mirror, it's so painful because we're like, oh, I don't like what I look like. I don't like what I'm seeing. And so when we dive into this, we think, oh, well, it's too painful to look at that mirror, so I'll focus on work instead because it looks good there. When I'm at work, my boss praises me, my coworkers love me, they say I did great work, and hey, more power to you. But then we get home, and what my invitation to you here is, again, this idea of submission, this idea of accepting myself as being imperfect, as being selfish at times, as being flawed. Sometimes I'll make a confession, I get a little too angry sometimes. Sometimes I get a little too lustful. And my wife, in her loving way, holds up a mirror that points back and says, Michael, this is what you're doing. Do you want to grow? Do you want to change? And it is difficult, but the satisfaction, the purpose that comes from willingly embracing the struggle on both fronts is very powerful. But don't wait. The older we get, the more set in our ways we get, the harder it is to look in that mirror. If you discern that it is the right time to get married, then get married. There's no good time to have kids either. There is never a good time to have kids. Kids are difficult and challenging and disruptive and painful and quite possibly the most purposeful and best thing you'll ever do with your life all at the same time. But that is the reality. And I talk to all these people like, well, we got married at 25, so we're going to wait probably 5-10 years before we have kids because then it'll be a better time. Like, nope, there'll be new challenges, different challenges then. Embrace is part of the growth. Kids, in the same way as marriage, cause me, if I'm healthy and react well, to introspective. Why am I reacting this way to my child? This is a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum, but I'm now throwing a tantrum. What's going on here? What's going on inside of me? And that's hard. That's painful work to do, but it's essential work to do. And the meaning that comes when we submit ourselves to that process is very powerful.
Right, submitted. So why do people who are outside marriage, they want to get into marriage, and so many of them who are into marriage, they have their own complaints. Is it that marriage is a chain? Is it more of responsibility? And why is it that the thriving part is not coming into their life? Are they doing something wrong, or they have to do something right? You will be able to tell that better.
So I think the first thing I want to say is most of us have a bad idea about what is marriage. Most of us get married thinking something like, finally, someone will take care of me and make me happy. I will give me the pleasure, the sex, the rewards, the validation, the acceptance, whatever it is I want. This is the person that's given to me. That's their job. That's why I'm signing on this marriage certificate. That's what I should get out of this deal, right? No. If you go into marriage with that expectation, you're in trouble. The primary purpose of marriage is it's like a forge. It burns us. It's like a crucible into this new, better person. And it's the struggle, this dynamic. It's ongoing. The struggle doesn't end. I think a lot of people think, I spent the time in dating. I courted her well. So we got married. Now she has to take care of me, right? No, it's this dynamic. And this bad expectation going into marriage causes so much of the confusion. I once read that frustration is merely a measure of the difference between your expectation and reality. And the closer you move your expectation to what reality is, the happier you'll be. And this is true, I'll say, even the dynamic dance of the genders. I happen to be a fan of the David Deidre style approach to genders, and this idea of the masculine and the feminine, and that they're opposite, and that opposites attract. And so often today, men don't dive into their masculine, and then they find that their wives aren't attracted to them. Well, I'm like, well, yeah, you are living in that masculine energy, allowing her to live in the feminine energy, which allow this dynamic attraction you were dating. But then you get into marriage, you kind of stop doing that. You stop showing up. It's hard work. It's work to live in the power of the masculine energy. Like, it doesn't just happen. It takes intentionality. But we need, as a married person, this expectation that putting the ring on the finger is the start of the work, not the end.
Right, right. Michael, you are a PhD in chemistry.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of people say that, it's like love and emotions and all these things are much more of a chemical reaction that happens. How should general people treat those things? Many people treat it as weakness. Many people say, I don't have time for all these emotions in life. I got to be a very hardcore person, emotionless person in at the workplace, at home, because I don't have time to show emotions. And there is a requirement of all these things. You got to be human, and there is nothing wrong about it. How does today's times are very different? It's a fast-paced life. Either you are at home or even outside, and sometimes you have to show that you are much more stronger than you are. Sometimes you are finding it difficult to be yourself. How do I put all those things together and still be the person I am? How should the world know me, especially for men? You are a life coach for men. I'm sure a lot of people have questions like that to you. How do you, what do you tell them amid so many dilemmas of life?
Jay, this is such a common issue, and you're totally right. Men in particular are really struggling. I think there's several things. Number one, the movie industry tells us that as a man, there's two emotions I'm allowed to have: anger and lust. That's it. Like, you look at Indiana Jones, look at any of the major male role models. Hey, I get to be angry. That's cool. That's manly. And I can be lusty. Hey, ladies. You know what I mean? That's it. And the rest of the emotions are highly discriminated against. And so what do men do? We think, okay, well, I shouldn't do that. A real man doesn't have them, doesn't feel them, and they shove them down. Well, I like to use the image of a trash compactor. Like, I don't know if you ever use those old school trash compactors where you kind of, shove down into the trash and it squishes it. Well, that's what men do with our emotions. And when we do that, we shove these emotions in this trash bucket, right? And we squish it down, and we squish it down, we keep squishing more, but we never empty it. We never process it. And if you've ever had a trash compactor, you keep putting more and more trash in there, keep squishing it, pretty soon you're going to notice something not great is happening. There's goo leaking out the bottom of that trash compactor, and it doesn't smell great, and it's getting under your cabinets, and it's spreading throughout your kitchen, and pretty soon your whole life starts to stink. You're like, oh, what is going on? Something's just not right here. And we tell ourselves it's a form of strength, but it's not. Strength is the ability to be dynamic, to embrace the challenges, to endure difficulties and come back from the difficulties and love the difficulties and grow in the difficulties. The trash compactor approach just dodges everything, and instead we become brittle. And so, number one, what I tell men, we need to understand that men and women have different meanings to the word, feelings, and emotions. They are different between the genders. There are similarities, of course, but the way that we as men process and experience an emotion, coming, especially if we're living in our masculine space of order, is so different than how the feminine approaches. And you even see this in the language. The way that women natively speak about their emotions and feelings is almost contradictory to men's ability to understand. And if you've been married, you know what I'm talking about. Your wife will start using words to describe what she's feeling. You're like, what? Those words don't even go together. But for her, it's fine. That's how women experience emotions. But as a man, you experience them differently. And if you try to use the language and style of emotion processing that works for a woman, but you're a man, it's kind of like if you're a diesel engine and you put gasoline in there, it doesn't work. If you've ever tried that, dear listener, I apologize for the amount of bills that you're paying to your poor mechanic to try to undo that. That's a serious repair job. And likewise in us. And so to the man who's listening right now saying, I don't need emotions, I can be strong, I can just shove them down. My real question is, how's that working for you? How are your relationships? How is your connection with your spouse and those you love? Are you feeling fulfilled? Are you feeling like at the end of the day that you're the hero who conquered the world, who slew the dragon and won the princess and found the pile of gold? Or is it one more day of grind where you get to the end and say, where's the beer so I can just drift off into unconsciousness and maybe get up and survive one more day tomorrow because that's as far as I can possibly dream? We're humans. We're designed. I believe as Christian, we have both body and soul. Whatever your language you want to use to it, there's this notion that there's more of me than just this flesh, and that there's this emotion is part of who I am. And I need to live in it. I need to embrace it. I need to share it. It creates the connections that I'm designed to have. And if I suppress it, it just inevitably leads to that stinky goo spreading throughout my life that no one wants to be around and no one really enjoys, and certainly no one wants to hug and be snuggly with.
Right, right, Michael. So help us understand the relationship between or the understanding of emotions by men of women and by women of men at different places at personal level or at home, that relations that they work differently. Does it work differently at workplace, or is it the same way? Because more and more women are getting into workplaces, and
So
men have to work very closely with them. How should uh, men, especially men, uh, understand those things in the context of the workplace? Because at home you can still be a bit more of yourself and may not like, or still be able to say something, but in workplace it will be different. How do you read those things at different levels?
you're absolutely right, Ajay. That is a major challenge of our time. But let me set some context for this. In the grand story of humans, the human Homo sapiens been around for something like 100,000-ish years. It is the tiniest drop in the bucket that men and women have worked together. The universal human way of operating is the men get together, go hunt a mammoth. The women get together, take care of the babies, do some clothes, and go hunt some berries. And they get together for a brief period of time at the very end of the day. And that's the day. And the genders were separated. And we don't know what really the right dynamic is yet. I'm speaking from an evolutionary perspective here. We don't really know the right dynamic for how men and women work together side by side. So this is still kind of an experiment. We do have to learn. And with any experiment, with any learning, we're going to get some stuff wrong. We're going to try an idea. It might work. It might not. And that's okay. But if I go back to the basics, I'm going to use an image that's one of my favorite images. I'm going to describe the masculine, the sense of order. And we're going to go, these are very old ideas. The order, and I like to use the image of rocks. And I spent a number of years in Oregon, and we have these rocky coasts where you have these big rocks, walls and spires that go up in the air, and these ocean waves and tides come in and smash against the rocks all day long. It's very beautiful. Men are like the rock. We're called to be order. We're called to be stability. I should be more specific. The masculine is like the rock, and the feminine is like the waves, and the term is chaos. And I think a lot of women don't like the term chaos because they have negative connotations. But everything good, everything new, all that is of life, and all that is what we need most, all comes from chaos. Chaos and order are both essential, right? But here's where this applies to the work. In a marriage, a man is called to live in the masculine, so his wife can live in the feminine, and there's attraction. When we go to work, both genders shift into the masculine. And just because I'm a man doesn't mean I don't have a feminine side. I most certainly do. And there are times, for example, I have 3 daughters. I have 6 kids total, but 3 of them are daughters. Yeah. And one of them is a teenager. And there are moments with this teenage girl that I need to shift into the feminine, because what she needs in that moment is an emotional presence to be with her as she is just up and down experiencing the emotions of a teenage girl, which Lord love her, she's a wonderful girl. But that's what she needs. And so at that moment, I need to shift into my feminine to be present. Now, when a woman goes to work, to a large extent, she has to shift into her masculine. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that in the slightest. But you see this in women when they become more order-based, more structured, more systemed. But it is undeniable that even within the workplace, there's always undercurrents that a man will be a little more naturally masculine, a woman will have a little more of the feminine to it. And this is an experiment we're trying to figure out, is how much feminine can be in the workplace and still make it be a productive workplace. And how much masculine is too much masculine, because we need certain amounts of feminine there too, right? And so as we go through this dance, my invitation to the listener would be just to be very aware of what the energy of the moment is. And this is a moment where you're working side by side with a woman who is deeply in her masculine, in which case show up in your own masculine and be present that way and get the job done. But is this a moment where maybe she shifted just a little bit in the feminine and she needs a little more tenderness, a little more presence? I'm not saying you should make a relationship that's inappropriate. By no means am I encouraging that. But there is definitely a place. My former boss from Intel was just the world's best demonstration of this. And he would just walk once a week to the cubicle of each of his employees. And he would say, what's going on in your life? Tell me how you're doing. How is your job affecting your life? What can I do that will make your life overall be better? And it was phenomenally successful because his employees loved him. They were dedicated. And when they did have problems, he'd give them some slack. But then when they were going well at home, they poured everything they had into it and showed up extra. And I think there's a great value and awareness that comes with this mixed environment that both the masculine and the feminine are important, and to be more aware what energy is going on here. And the old rule when you're hunting a mammoth with a group of guys was it's all masculine, no talking. No, he was sneaking up on a mammoth. You go left, I go right, you throw your spear, I do a feint, whatever. I don't even know how to hunt mammoth, right? But the new rule, the new system where the genders are mixed is more of a dance. We have to be more aware and attentive to the moment, what's happening here.
Right, Michael. Right. Let's look at it another way. Nowadays, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, even husband, wives together. A lot of startups are there, and very successful startups are there, where husband and wife have been, directors or partners, business partners, and that has done so well. Even you have, with your wife, you have had the 3 successful businesses, and now
Yes,
you
sir.
both are again life coaches. So, what is it that it does not work in the workplace? It may not work in the home environment, but it works together when you work as business partners, or maybe it works everywhere. What is the secret there? And when men come to you, do they come as victims or do they come as people who want to have solutions?
I think we all start as victims. And then once the results of victimhood are pointed out, we realize victimhood never gets us what we want, and we open up solutions. But let me use myself as an example here. And the reality is, it is very difficult to be married to a woman that you're a business partner with. And we have had some struggles in this regard. And one of the things that we've learned is we have to be crystal clear what type of interaction we're having. And it's so difficult of a challenge that at this point, we purchase and we rent an office for her to go to. And so she leaves the home, she goes to this office, and we have a calendar. We have 7 layers in our calendar for all the different stuff that goes on, right? And when she's at the office, she's in work mode. And with any communication she and I have is professional work mode, right? And when she leaves the office at the end of the day and she comes home, she enters into mom and wife mode. And that drive is a critical part of the transition for her. Much like for a man who works the office needs to use his commute home to change his heart and his perspective, the drive for her is really a critical part of the process. It gives her the time to, okay, I'm coming home. The work stuff has to be left behind. Now it's time for me to engage with my wife and my wife to engage with me as husband and wife, not as business partners. And you must maintain a clear distinction. Which mode is it? And I would be lying, Jay, if I said we never have a business discussion after she comes home. It does come up. But we try to be very, very aware and conscious to create space where we are not business partners, but are lovers. And that is really a difficult thing to do it's a difficult thing to do, period. But it's particularly difficult if you aren't being intentional. And I would even encourage you to use cues, to use things like an office, to use whatever. For a while, we tried office doors. Like when the door is shut, it means we're in business mode. When the door is open, it means we're not in business mode. And find something that works for you, but understand the size of the challenge you're asking for if you want to be a business partner with your wife.
Absolutely, Michael. So, what is it that you would want to suggest to men? If you are a life coach for men, so what would you like to suggest to men in
The
terms
number
of what their place is in today's time? How do they balance being a man and at the same time also have to show their feminine side, whatever is there within them?
The number one thing I would encourage a man listening to right now is to find a group of men, specifically men, that are willing to be vulnerable, to be intimate, to be connected, to share their real struggles, their real failures, their real challenges in life with, to have other men to encourage them on. And here's why this is critical. If I go back to this analogy of the waves and the rocks and the chaos and the order, and here's your rock, right? And the wave comes in and splashes the rock. And the rock sits there and says, wait a second, I didn't do anything. I got slapped upside the face by a sinking wave. I was innocent here. Well, the wave goes back out, the wave comes in, smashes him again. The reality is the expectation, the nature of masculine is the ability to be solid in all these different worlds. And that's what we're called to be. We're called to be a rock in our marriage. We're called to be a rock in our workplace. But we need a place to not be a rock. We need a place to say, I'm struggling. There's this cute intern at my office, and every time she walks by, my head follows her, and I don't want that relationship. And guys, I need some advice and some help. I need to be slapped upside the head. You can't say that to your wife. You can't say that at the workplace. You have to have a group of men, and it needs to be men, not a mixed group, to really be able to show up and say, I'm struggling with this. And for them to respond and say, Michael, don't go down that path. You know where that path goes. Take radical action. Move your cube. Whatever you have to do till you don't have that temptation in your life, because that will go poorly. Now, if you are a person of faith like myself, I strongly encourage as well that this group be faithful and share your faith, because that's something that binds men together. But this group of men is critical for a man's mental health. He simply cannot share all of his struggles with his wife. The reverse isn't true. Wives have full permission. The nature of being chaos is they get to be chaotic, and they get to share whatever they want to share with a man, no questions asked. But men don't get to share whatever they want to share with their wives. They have to be order. And if they go too far into chaos with their wives get scared. And then that marriage relationship is no longer what it needs to be. So find a group of men. Don't go it alone. You simply cannot go it alone. I'm going to close with this concept that I have found to be life-changing. Women thrive on praise. And if you're married, you know this. You have to praise your wife. Women thrive, they grow, they flourish on praise in the same way that men thrive on challenge. And that is a critical thing to understand. When you have two guys, they challenge each other, they fight. And I'm going to use one Bible verse, and we talk about in the Bible how iron sharpens iron. And the image of iron sharpening iron is very interesting because it's grindy and hot and messy and sparky, and there's intensity there. There's heat. And that is the nature of what men need to thrive. And a woman cannot challenge a man in the same way that a man challenges a man. And that sort of comment may get me some dislike from some people on the internet, but I will stand to that comment because I do believe there's something unique that comes when men challenge men that provides a fuel for us to grow and spreads that goodness into every other part of our life. And that's what I would encourage a listening man to go do to help give himself a spot to grow, to be present in his work and home.
Right. There is so much to learn about the mindset, about what men and women both are made of, and it is such a vast topic. So this is just one podcast host. You have a podcast where you talk about all these things in many. So tell us about your podcast, Michael, Catholic Life Coach for Men.
So I am Christian. I have a faith-based background. And one of the things that I bring that's very unique is I think there's a lot of life coaches out there that will talk about the feelings and drift with the universe and all that. And great, more power to them. I'm an analytical guy. I have a PhD in chemistry. I look at the world by set rules. World follows rules. But I'm also a faithful Christian. And so I bring these things all together where I'm like, if you are looking to understand how do emotions work, how do they fit into the Christian story, but how does that fit with this life coaching idea, but still be analytical, that's the work that I do. And I'm going to talk about biology. I'm going to talk about brain states and brain chemistries. I'm going to talk about some of, psychological studies that we've done that show empirically how our brains function in different settings and scenarios. But all of this ties back to this fundamental goal of my life sucks when I'm doing it wrong. And I don't like that. I mean, I don't think anybody likes that. No one wants to be around saying, I'm living a life that's boring and dull, and I'm sad every day, and I'm drifting through, and I'm masturbating and watching a porn because I don't know what else to do with my wife. Like, nobody wants to live that life. We want a life that's full of goodness, and the potential is there. And I'm going to dive into my faith a little bit. I believe that God created every human being with this potential for greatness, with this potential for love. And when we don't live into that potential, a little piece of us dies and shrinks down. And that's what I'm trying to help stand up with the podcast and the work that I do.
Absolutely. So how can people, listen to your podcast, watch your shows, and also as a life coach, how can people learn more about you and also engage with you professionally?
I'm not a marketing guru, so I just chose simple names. I'm a life coach. I work with men, and I'm Catholic. So I call myself a Catholic life coach for men. Throw a .com on the end of it, you got my website. Leave the .com off, you got my podcast. I don't do a lot of social media. Mostly I'm word of mouth, kind of a spreading kind of guy. So just throw out Catholic life coach for men, and you will find me. I work with everybody. I specialize. I think the greatest value I offer is to those who are Christian.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.